is spring 21, and this is 101 week 13, part 3. Okay, this is going pretty good. So let's continue on now that we have. Oh, am I going to say that? I, I can't decide if I should say this or not. Maybe I'll say it in a later video. Maybe I don't want to say it now. Now I'm going to say it now. The French have this idea called jouissance, which is not an idea that we have in English, but it's a kind of pleasure that is so extreme it's pushed into pain. Um, it's all often used to describe orgasm, like an orgasm that's so hard it feels pleasurable, but it's like so strong it almost hurts. It's like too intense. And the French have another phrase for orgasm, le petit mort, which is the little death, which is a really interesting way to describe orgasm. But it's like you're almost like outside of your body. Um, you're gone. Like it's almost like you've been wiped out by pleasure. Like it's pleasure that's so extreme it almost wipes out your personality, like, even briefly. And so and drugs also have that same effect of like there's so much drugs are so intense that they can kind of destroy. You're just gone. Your personality it comes back after a while, but like it can like obliterate your personality. This is what she means by joy. Um, yeah, it's an extreme. I mean, it is. I still want to. She doesn't want to describe it as an extreme form of pleasure, but I kind of do want to describe it. It's a type of pleasure that's so intense that it threatens to kind of blow up your life. So, okay, let's see what else we've got here. Um, Perhaps the first thing to say is that I experience at least a little pleasure every day. I wonder if this is more than the usual amount. It was the same even in childhood when most people are miserable. By the way, I thought that was a really weird sentence. Even in childhood when most people are miserable. Are most people miserable in childhood? I don't know. I think a little kid is being actually happier than adults. She seems to think little kids are all miserable. I guess maybe she means high school, but that's not, I guess that's childhood. I don't know. I thought that was a really weird thing that she said that. I don't know. I mean, I'm a pretty happy person all the time, so we'll see. Okay. Maybe I'm not a good judge because I'm often in like a really good mood, more than most of my friends. Um, I don't think this is because so many wonderful things happen to me, but rather that the small things go a long way. I seem to get more than the ordinary satisfaction out of food, for example. Any old food. An egg sandwich from one of those grimy food vans on Washington Square has the genuine power to turn my day around. Whatever is put in front of me, food wise, will usually get a 5-star review. So, okay, she's got some examples. So she's talking about pleasure and joy. So she starts out with examples of pleasure, and she picks food. Nice and easy. I don't have a lot to say about this paragraph. Let's move the fuck on. Okay. You'd think that people would like to cook for or eat with me. In fact, I'm told it's boring. Where there is no discernment, meaning she can't really she enjoys food so much that she thinks it's all good, whereas discernment is usually when you can tell good food from bad food, but she thinks all food is really good. Where there's no discernment, there can be no awareness of expertise or gratitude for special effort or for special effort. Don't say that was delicious, my husband warns. You say everything's delicious. But it was delicious. It drives him crazy. All day long, I can look forward to a popsicle. The persistent anxiety that fills the rest of my life is calmed for as long as I have the flavor of something good in my mouth. And although it's true that when the flavor is finished, the anxiety returns, we do not have so many reliable sources of pleasure in this life as to turn our nose up at one that is so readily available, especially here in America. A pineapple popsicle. Even the great anxiety of writing can be stilled for the 8 minutes it takes to eat a pineapple popsicle. Again, I'm slightly, I don't know, I guess people experience their life as she seems her regular everyday state seems to be constant anxiety, and that popsicles make her feel good for a little while and forget about her anxiety. I don't know. I'm not a person who is anxious all the time, so maybe I'm a bad person to be teaching this. I don't know. Again, I don't have a lot to say about that paragraph. It's kind of a cute example of pleasurable things. I just think it's interesting that she thinks all children are miserable and she's anxious all the time. I don't. Are most people like that? Am I weird for being in a good mood? I don't know. All right, let's see what else we've got. My other source of daily pleasure is, but I wish I had a better way of putting it, other people's faces. So these are more examples of pleasure. A red-headed girl with a marvelous large nose she probably hates and green eyes and that sun-shy complexion composed more freckles than skin. Or a heavy-set grown man smoking a cigarette in the rain with a soggy mustache above which a surprise. The keen eyes, snub-nosed, and cherub mouth of his own 8-year-old self. Upon leaving the library at the end of the day, I will walk a little more quickly to the apartment to tell my husband about an angular, cat eyed teenager in skinny jeans and stacked heel boots, a perfectly ordinary gray sweatshirt, last night's makeup, and a silky Pocahontas wig slightly askew over his own afro. He is sashaying down the street, plates flying, using the whole of Broadway as his personal catwalk. Miss Thang, but off duty. I add this for clarity, but my husband nods a little impatiently. There was no need for the addition. For the addition, my husband is also a professional gawker. So, she's really just. This is something, and I will admit, I do this too. This now, I was saying how different I was than she was, but I also do this. I like to look at people. I like to eat outside and watch people go by. I love to be in an airport and just watch people go by. I just think it's people have. And now, notice by the way, she's not. At first, I thought she was talking about hot people because I do that too, right? You're like, oh, that person's really good looking, and you see a good looking person, that's pleasure. But she's not talking about hot people. She's talking about something that I also do, which is just, I don't know, people are interesting looking, and I like to look at them and think about their lives. I don't know why. I just think some people have weird faces. You just see these strange, especially in New York City. There's so many different looking people and all different races and all different backgrounds and all these different ages and different cultural groups. And like everybody just looks interesting. They have an interesting, you just feel like you could talk to any of them and find out an interesting story. I totally know what she's talking about. I do the same thing with my wife. I'll be like, oh, I really saw this interesting looking person walking down the street. And New York has crazy people in it. You can see, like, you get on the subway, you see crazy people everywhere. It's fun. Because especially on the subway system, right, where you have like you'll have like a woman in a hijab next to like a 6.5 foot tall drag queen in like giant heels and like a huge red wig, and I'm just like, I love New York, man. There's just all kinds of interesting people sitting side by side. Everybody's got very different stories. Anyway, I totally know what she's talking about. She continues to give, just like your essays were asked for examples, she's giving a lot of examples. So these are her examples of pleasure: food and people's faces. These are just examples right now. Let's keep going. Okay. The advice one finds in ladies' magazines is usually to. Oh, I'm sorry. And my husband is also a professional gawker. I should say a gawker is someone who looks. If you're gawking, it means you're looking. And her and her husband both enjoy just like looking at people. Gawking is to look. But it's like looking in ooh, that's interesting. I want to see more of that kind of way. Okay, so let's keep going with this. The advice one finds in ladies' magazines is usually to be feared, but there is something in that old chestnut, shared interests. Because she's joking that ladies' magazines often tell you if you're going to be romantically involved with somebody, you should share interests. You need some things in common to talk about. And what she has in common with her husband is they like looking at people on the street. It does help. I like to hear about the Chinese girl he saw in the hall carrying a large medical textbook so beautiful she looked like an illustration. Or the tall Kenyan in the elevator whose elongated physical elegance reduced every other nearby body to the shrunken, gnarly status of a troll. Usually, I will not have seen these people. My husband works on the 8th floor of the library, I work on the 5th, but simply hearing them described can be almost as much a pleasure as encountering them myself. More pleasurable still is when we recreate the walks or gestures or voices of these strangers or whole conversations between two people in the queue for the ATM or two students on a bench near the fountain. So they like looking at interesting faces, but also overhearing conversations. That's another part of New York life. We walk around New York and you'll see interesting people, but like you'll also hear people having these weird conversations and you're like, what the hell were they talking about? Why did they say that? That's so interesting. So this essay so far, it's not super interesting so far. She wants to talk about the difference between pleasure and joy. So and obviously pleasure seems like she has the same definition of pleasure I do. But she starts the essay off with lots of examples of just everyday pleasure. Now, she's doing that because she's going to want to show how different that is than joy. So right now, the essay is not super interesting, but I think it gets more interesting. So let's find out in the next video.